Okay, so in the last class we started looking at Turing machines, and today we will complete the description of what are Turing machines and how they work, and we'll take several examples of solving problems using Turing machines, recognizing languages using Turing machines. Now, as we saw last time, a Turing machine consists of a finite state control. So at any point in its execution, it can be in some state, let us say P, and from a finite set of states. It also has an one directional infinite tape, which is divided into cells. And the cells can store symbols, and the symbols come from a tape alphabet. Gamma. So here these symbols AB, etc. are from the tape alphabet. We can use this. Now this is a read-write tape. So what the Turing machine can do is, based on the current state that it has a head which is positioned at one of the cells. And it can read the symbol in the current cell. Okay. And based on the current state of the finite state control and the current symbol being read, the Turing machine makes a move. So that move is given by delta of PA. And what does delta of PA say? Well, the Turing machine will change its state from P to Q. It has ability to change the symbol at a cell. So currently it was reading symbol A at this cell. Instead, it will rewrite it with symbol B. So this A will get rewritten by B, and then the head will move either one step to the left or one step to the right. So one of the actions of the Turing machine is the direction in which head moves, which is either L or R. So suppose this move was L, then the head position will come here, right? So this is, and our set of each transition will look like this, and we will have a set of transitions. Okay, we will also allow epsilon to occur here, so you can make a move without looking at the current symbol. That is what is a Turing machine. So it has got an infinite read-write tape divided in cells. One thing to notice is that the initial cell numbered 0, we number cells 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. The leftmost cell is marked with the left end marker, right? This left end marker symbol. And when the Turing machine begins its execution, we put the word to be recognized onto the tape. The rest of the tape contains the blank symbols. So this symbol here denotes a blank symbol. It means no useful symbol has been written onto the tape. Okay. And so currently the tape content is left hand marker followed by A, B, B, A, B, A, and then an infinite sequence of blanks, right? And so what we can say is that at any point, currently the tape will consist of the left hand marker, which will never be changed, followed by a string Y belonging to gamma star, where gamma is the tape alphabet. So you have a finite sequence of tape alphabet symbols, and this is followed by an infinite sequence of blanks, right? This is the scratch tape part of the Turing machine. You can go to the blank part of the Turing machine and write some symbols there. So you have infinite amount of memory available for doing your work in the Turing machine, right? And what is a configuration of the Turing machine? Well, the configuration of the Turing machine is the state in which the Turing machine is, the current content of the tape, and the cell at which the head is positioned. So if I go back to this diagram, let's say the finite state control is in state P, then the current content of the tape is this, and the head is positioned at position 0, cell number 4. So we can write down this configuration as following: the state is P, the tape content is A, B, B, ABA followed by omega blank, infinite sequence of blanks, and the head is at position 4, right? So this is the current configuration of the Turing machine. Given this configuration, there are transition rules like that. We look at, what is the current symbol at cell 4, which is this A. This is the fourth cell, and at that the position is L. Current state is P. So this transition will apply, and so we will change the state. We will transform this configuration to go to Q. In place of this A. Okay, so this transition, let me draw in blue so that you don't confuse it with head position. And then what is the new configuration you will get? The tape will become ABB, and this A will be changed to B because A is being rewritten as B. And you've got BA blank raised to omega, and the head moves, let's say direction is left. So the head moves to position number 3. That is, it will come here. This will be the position of the head now, right? This is how a Turing machine makes a move. So formally, what is a Turing machine? It is this 9-tuple where Q is the finite set of states, gamma is the tape alphabet. So each cell will contain a symbol from this tape. There is a distinguished symbol called left-hand marker, which is part of gamma. And there is also a distinguished symbol called blank, which is part of gamma. Now the input word which we are trying to recognize comes from an alphabet sigma, which is a subset of gamma. So sigma is a subset of gamma, right? In fact, sigma does not contain blank and left-hand marker. That is given here, right? And the transition is something that we saw before. Transition is a set of rules like that. The Turing machine has 3 distinguished states: a start state, an accept state called T. There's only one final state or one accept state called T, and one reject state called R. And R and T, of course, have to be different, right? So that is what is a Turing machine. And what the Turing machine does is, it will go through a sequence of transitions, changing the configuration from one to another. So this is what. Now, when the Turing machine begins, we have a Turing machine M, and we are trying to recognize a word X using the Turing machine. So the input to the Turing machine is the word X. In that case, we start the Turing machine in this initial configuration. That the Turing machine is in the start state S. The initial content of the tape is left-hand marker followed by the input word X followed by an infinite sequence of blank cells. And the head is positioned on the top of this left-hand marker, that is at position 0. So this is the initial configuration on input X. So a Turing machine M on input X will have an initial configuration which looks like this, right? Now let me try to, and what the Turing machine does is it makes a move, from the current configuration to go to the next configuration. That move is defined here. Suppose my current configuration is like this. I am in state P. Z is the content of the tape. So Z basically contains symbols Z1, Z2. These are tape alphabet symbols. Z3 goes on like this. There is Zn-1. Then there is the symbol Zn. Then there is the symbol Zn+1. And it goes on like that, right? That is what is my tape, current tape Z. And the head is positioned at position N. That is, it is reading this symbol Zn currently. If I have a transition which says from state P, which is my current state, on reading symbol Zn, which is my current symbol under the head, what will I do? I will go to state Q and I will rewrite B at this Zn position. So whatever was the symbol Zn here, I will rewrite it at B. So the new content of the tape will be Z1, Z2, Z3. All this doesn't change. Zn-1. This becomes B because we are rewriting the symbol under the head to B, Zn+1. etc. And I'm moving one step to the left. So my head comes here. This is my next configuration. And I'm in state Q here. Here I was in state P. So this is the kind of transition that occurs. Similarly, you can have a transition, moving to the right, in which case the head will come here. So is the notion of how the configuration of the Turing machine changes clear? This symbol here, S, B, and Z, says in the current tape Z, change the nth cell, rewrite the nth cell by symbol B. That is what it means. So we are changing this Zn by B by saying that substitute B at position N in tape Z. That is what this means. Okay, so I hope these transitions are clear to you. And of course, we can make a sequence of moves. So let me take an example at this point, and I'm going to first take a very simple example. What we want to do is we want to accept all words over alphabet AB that contain at least one B. Now this job could have been done by a finite state automaton, but here I'm going to do it using Turing machine just to give you an idea of a very simple Turing machine, right? So what does this Turing machine look like? Let us look. Let's look. So my Turing machine will have three states, S, T, and R. My tape alphabet will contain symbols A, B, as well as left hand marker and blank. These four symbols will be written on the tape. And my input alphabet is just A, B, right? Now, suppose we are trying to recognize a word which looks like A, B, A, B. Okay. So then, what are the rules of the Turing what are the transition rules? The transition rules are given here. It says if you are in state S and if you look the end marker, you rewrite the you do not change, you rewrite left hand marker by left hand marker. So you do not change the symbol and you move one step to the right. So on seeing a left hand marker, you just move one step to the right without changing the tape. Similarly, if you are in state S and you see A, you move one step to the right without changing the tape. So, you skip all the left hand marker and the A's when you are in state S. So I will draw this diagrammatically as follows. I'll have a Turing machine, a state called S, which is the initial state. And what I will do is I'll write something like this. On reading the left hand marker, I will rewrite back left hand marker and I will move one step to the right. Similarly, on reading, an A, I will rewrite it as A and move one step to the right, right? So I have not completed this Turing machine, but we can already see what will happen. On this input word A, B, we'll have the start configuration, which will look like, so what will be the start configuration of this Turing machine? Of course, S is the start state. So my initial configuration of the Turing machine will be, I'll be in start state and my tape will contain the input word, which is what we are trying to recognize. So it will have A, B, and I have to give the head position. Instead of writing the number of the head position, I will just put an arrow there so that it's easier to see. I could have written 0 instead of putting arrow here. I could have put 0 here because this is cell numbered 0, right? And then what happens? Let's see some transitions which are drawn in blue. In one step move, this Turing machine will say that currently I am in state S and the symbol under the head is left bracket. So this rule will apply, right? This rule will apply. And so I will remain in state S. Basically, I will take this transition. I will remain in state S. So which state? I will remain in state S and my tape, I will rewrite left hand marker by left hand marker. So my tape is not going to change also in this move because I've written the same symbol back, right? And my head will move one step to the right. So now my configuration looks like this. Don't confuse blue arrow with red arrow. Red arrow shows the position of the head and the blue arrow shows one transition, right? So it has skipped. Sorry, I made a mistake. The head will come here. I will skip over this left hand marker and go to the next symbol A. Similarly, in the next move, I will skip over this A, using this transition. Okay, because currently I'm in state S and the symbol under the head is A, so this transition applies. So I will remain in state A. What will be the configuration I will get? I will get S. I will rewrite back A here and the head will move to this A. Again, I will apply one more. So by making two moves here, by making two moves, what will I reach? I will reach a configuration which looks like this. I will remain in state S. My tape will be not chained, B, AB, but my head will come here. And now something interesting happens. What should we do in state S once we encounter B? See, we are trying to recognize a language which contains at least one B. So what I will do is on reading a B, I will rewrite it as B, move one step to the right, and I will go to the accepting state. Now this is the accepting state, so the Turing machine will finish its business. So the next I have a transition like this in my Turing machine. So in one step, what will happen? I will go to the configuration where I will be in state T. My tape will be AA, B, AB, and my head will be here. And this is what I call as an accepting configuration because I am in the accepting state T. Okay, and the aim of my Turing machine is to reach either accepting configuration or rejecting configuration. If I reach the accepting configuration, I accept the original word which was written on the tape. So here there were blanks. I'm not writing blanks for convenience. Okay, so this is how this Turing machine works. Let me give another example. Suppose, well, there is one more transition to be written here. What happens if we never encounter a B, if the word does not have any B? So we'll skip all the A's using this transition, and at some point we'll finish all the A's and B's and we'll hit the blank symbol. So on encountering a blank symbol, before encountering a B, we'll rewrite it again as blank, move one step to the left if you like, and we'll go to the rejecting state. So, let me show you a simple run of Turing machine using, you start with state A's and the word is AA blank followed by other blanks and my head position is 0, right? So in one step, there is a left hand marker also here. So, using this in the first transition, I'll skip over this left hand marker, then I'll skip over A, I'll skip over this B. And so in 3 transitions, I will reach a configuration where I am in state S and the tape is still AA blank and my head is positioned here. And in the next step, I will go to R. The tape remains AA blank and my head will move one step to the left. So I will read the reject state and hence I will reject this word. So this word AA, which was put on the tape, which does not contain any B, will be rejected. So this simple Turing machine, accepts all the words which contain at least one B and it rejects all the words which have no B in them, right? And it always terminates. Okay, so few terminologies. So given a configuration, for a given Turing machine, given a configuration, in one step we change it to another configuration called B. And we can talk about, moving successively doing one step moves, and we can talk about, configuration beta arises from alpha in n moves. And we can say that beta is reachable from alpha if starting from alpha after some finite number of moves you reach configuration beta. Right? So we have this usual notions of, having defined one step move of the Turing machine, we can define n step move of the Turing machine, and we can talk about beta being reached from alpha, right? Because our Turing machine is deterministic, from a configuration, there is a unique configuration to which you read. Now, if my Turing machine, you know, is able to reach a configuration of the form T with some Z and I, then we say it has reached the accepting state, and we say Turing machine is in the accepting configuration. And in that case, the Turing machine halts and accepts the word X. Okay, that is our terminology. So what does the Turing machine do? It accepts, halts and accepts word X if configuration of the form T with some Z and some I, tape content Z and some head position I is reachable. On the other hand, the Turing machine reaches a configuration RZI for some Z and I, then we say that the Turing machine rejects the word X, right? So depending on whether Turing machine reaches T or it reaches R, it will accept or reject the word. That's clear to you? Okay. There are some additional possibilities. One is that the Turing machine is looking at the left-hand marker, okay, and we have a rule which says move to the left, but there is no cell to the left to move to. So this kind of moves are illegal for Turing machines. So to avoid illegal moves, we will have conditions which look like this. That is, you know, oops. We'll have conditions look like this. Forget this. This we will not have. We will have from any state P, if the cell is reading the left-hand marker, then you must move to the right. That is, you cannot fall off from the move to the left side of the left-hand marker because there is no cell there. And we will always rewrite left-hand marker with left-hand marker. So in some sense, the tape will always contain left-hand marker at cell 0 and will never move to its left. Okay. Secondly, from the states T and S, there will be no transitions. So once you reach T or once you reach state R, you cannot make any more moves. You have reached the final destination configuration. That is how we will do it. This is a little bit different from Cozen, but this is what we will follow. So is the notion of Turing machine halting and accepting and halting and rejecting clear? But there could be one more possibility. We can write a Turing machine which just goes through a run which looks like this. It starts with the initial configuration alpha 0, then it goes to alpha 1, which is not accepting or rejecting, and it goes to alpha 2, and it keeps going forever, you know, neither reaching an accepting configuration, not reaching a rejecting configuration, but it keeps generating newer and newer configurations. Why is this possible? Because we have infinite tape. So for example, if we forgot to say that on encountering blank, you should go to reject state. Instead, you remain in state P. You will keep scanning the tape forever, you know, skipping over blanks forever. And, you know, the execution will never terminate. So it is possible that there are executions in Turing machines which go through an infinite sequence of configurations, none of which is either an accepting configuration or a rejecting configuration. In this case, we say that the Turing machine M loops on word X. Right? So it's very important to realize that a Turing machine, so this kind of configurations which are accepting or rejecting are called halting terminal configurations. And if we go through an infinite sequence of configurations, none of which is terminal, then we say that the Turing machine loops on word X or does not halt on X. You know, this is the terminology loop. Why loops? Because we have finitely many states, and as you go through this configuration, some state will repeat infinitely often, which is not an accepting state or a rejecting state. Okay, so we have three kinds of possibilities in Turing machines. Now, why is this possibility? This is just like programs. You may write programs which don't halt on some input. They just keep on computing forever, you know. And programs which halt on every input are called algorithms, right? This terminology arose after these Turing machines were defined. What Turing said was that if you have a Turing machine which for any input which is given to it in the initial configuration, it halts. It either reaches accepting configuration or rejecting configuration. Such Turing machines are called total Turing machines. And this idea of total Turing machines of Turing are nowadays called algorithms. So, you know, all this Turing machine was defined much before modern computers or modern programming languages came about, and it has influenced the design of today's computers and programming languages by having ideas like algorithms versus programs. Programs may not terminate, algorithms must terminate for every input, you know, and then it may accept or reject the word. Okay. So we saw one example. In this case, we had an accepting run because it ended in the accepting configuration. Here we had a rejecting run. In this Turing, this is a total Turing machine. For any input that you give from the input alphabet A, B star, it will terminate. Eventually, it will reach either state T or state R. This you can do by inspection, saying that you are skipping over all A's. What can happen? You have a finite sequence of A's and B's. So either you will encounter a B, or the word consists only of A's, and you will like skip over all those A's and you will hit the blank. At this point, you will get to the reject state. So by our intuition, we can see that this Turing machine is total. But if I give you a very complicated Turing machine and an input, it's not so easy to determine whether it is a total Turing machine or not. You may also ask, why do we design Turing machines which are not total? And that's a deep question. I will like to take that question little later. You know, one thing is that, you know, we made a mistake. We defined an inefficient Turing machine. So which is why we did it. Let's come to this question a little later. Now, what I want to do is take one more example. So I will do that by opening another file. Let me do one thing. Let me first save these changes. Okay. And then let me open. I've got Turing machine examples, tmexamples.xml. Okay. So I want to do one more example. Here is a, you know what I have. Sorry, apologies for that. Let's rub this off. I have erased the useful symbols. A, B, B, and then one C, and then blanks, right? So what we want this Turing machine to do is to, you know, accept a string of the form A star, B star, C star. And what we want it to do is, you know, when this string is put on the tape with a blank after that, we want to turn the leftmost blank, a symbol like this. Our aim is this. Our Turing machine will start in the start state S with the head pointing at the left hand marker. This will be the initial configuration for the string A, B, C. And what it should do is, it should accept this string, turn this blank symbol into a special symbol called right hand marker. Okay, and then it should bring the head back to this first symbol after the left hand marker. So the head should come here. You want a Turing machine which will go in a sequence of moves from this configuration to this configuration. This is what we want it to do. Now, here I have drawn a Turing machine, but before I do that, let me illustrate something here. Okay, if I have a move like this, which says on left turn style from state S, I will rewrite back left turn style. So I don't change the symbol and I move so one step to the right. It would be more convenient for me to write it like this, that I have this symbol. I don't change it. I denote by putting a dot there and I move at the right. So dot is an abbreviation for saying the symbol at the current cell is not changed, right? And if I have another move here which says on reading an A, I rewrite back A, moving one step to the right, I can put here A dot comma right. But I can also combine these two transitions. I can abbreviate it in the following form, that on either a left end marker symbol or an A symbol, I will leave the symbol as it was and I will move one step to the right. So these two transitions I can abbreviate diagrammatically like this. This still represents two transitions, one on left hand marker and one on A, but I can write it more conveniently like this. So this abbreviation we will use, and we will diagrammatically design a Turing machine which does this. Okay. So what does this Turing machine do? It starts in the, oh no, this is not the Turing machine. This is the one we have. So it starts in the start state and it skips over all the A's and left hand marker. So it will skip this left hand marker. It will skip the symbols A. So it will keep skipping these symbols till it comes to this position. The head will move from here to here without changing the tape, because it will loop in this state, skipping over left hand marker in A, not changing the symbol and moving one step to the right till it starts reading a B under the head. So when it reads a B under the head, it does not change the B, it moves one step to the right, but it changes the state to S1. So in S1, you should see a sequence of B's. Okay. So while you are in S1, you skip over all the B's, leaving them as it is, moving one step to the right. So if I draw in green, while you were in this part, you skipped over these symbols being in state S. Once you came to this B, you change the state to S1. And then you skipped all the B's while staying in S1. That is what you did till you found a C. On reading that C, you will change your state to S2. This is what it does, right? It changes to S2. What happens if you are in S1 where you are skipping over B's, you find a symbol A. So after some A's, you read some B's, you were expecting, you read at least one B, you skipped over some B's, and after that you found an A. So the string is no longer in the form A star, B star, C star. You got A star, B, some B's, and then again A is occurring. So you go to the reject state, right? And then on the other hand, if you find a C, then you skip all the C's till you hit the first blank symbol. So once you skip over all the C's and find the first blank symbol, you rewrite that blank symbol by the right hand marker. Okay, and you move one step to the left. So your configuration becomes something like this. You change this blank, once the head is here, you replace this blank by right hand marker and your head comes here. And then once the head is here, you skipping to the left using this transition. All A, B's and C's you skip to the left till you get the left hand marker, at which point you move one position to the right. So you will wind up with head being one position to the right of the right hand marker, that is this. Why are we doing this? This will be useful, this part of the Turing machine will be used as a subcomponent, as a subroutine in the next Turing machine that I consider for the full problem. But here is an example where the symbol was changed. So now what happens is, this position, let me erase the green part and illustrate again. What do I have? I run the previous Turing machine first, where I have ensured that the sequences of the form A star, B star, C star, and I have enclosed that sequence between left and right hand markers. Now what I do is, in this Turing machine, let me give you the schema. What I do is, in one phase of this Turing machine, what I do is I scan the string. I start with head here. I scan the string from left to right and I find the first A symbol and erase it to blank. So first A gets erased to blank. Then I continue and I look for the first B and turn it into blank, right? So I'm sorry, turn it into blank. I scan forward and find the first C and I turn it into blank. I hit the right hand marker. Okay. Now, what is the idea? If I erase an A, then I must erase one B. If I don't find any B, I directly find a C, then I will reject. So I will erase in one pass, I will erase exactly one A, one B and one C. Or if I don't find one A, one B, one C, I will reject, right? And then I will bring the head back to the start and I will repeat this phase. So I will repeatedly be erasing equal number of A's, B's and C's. One A, one B and one C in each pass. So my general configuration will, the tape will contain some blanks followed by some A's, some blanks, in fact equal number of blanks, followed by some B's and blanks followed by C's, right? And when I'm trying to erase, if I find an A, I must find a B and I must find a C. So I will go from this configuration to this. When I'm here and when I'm looking for an A, if I don't find any symbol other than blank, that is I skip over only blanks and hit the right hand marker, I have erased equal number of A's and B's, and so I will accept. So my Turing machine is like this. I will be in state S, and if I skip over all the blanks moving to the right, and if I skip my string only consists of blanks, which means I have erased equal number of A's, B's and C's, then I go to the accept state. On the other hand, if this does not happen, if I directly find a B symbol without finding an A, skipping over some blanks, I hit a B, then an A is missing and I go to a reject state. If I find an A, the first A I replace by a blank symbol, move one step to the right, and then I skip all the remaining A's and remaining blanks. So I will turn this first A into blank, and then I will skip this part of the string. I will skip this part of the string till I hit a B. So when I hit a B, this B I using this transition here drawn in green, I will replace that B by a blank, and then I'll skip over remaining B's till I find a C, which I will replace by a blank. And then I will move one step to the left and I will try to hit the left hand marker. I will skip over all the symbols, left hand marker, move one step to the right and start the next phase. So this is what I do. So you can study this Turing machine, but this is how we can recognize a string of the form A raised to n, B raised to n by first running the previous Turing machine, which will check that the string is of the form A star, B star, C star, and then convert this the original tape to this configuration, and then we will run this Turing machine to check that there are equal number of A's and B's and C's by erasing one A, one B and one C in each pass, doing multiple such passes. So you are getting a flavor of how a Turing machine works, right? This is what I wanted to save this. Let's continue with our original description. I'm going to do one more example. Okay, you already know that the language A raised to n, B raised to n, C raised to n is not a context-free language. So Turing machine can recognize some languages which are not context-free. Here is another language. It's called the WW language, with W belonging to AB star. All words of the form WW, where W is an arbitrary word, in alphabet, over alphabet AB, must be accepted. So what are the kind of words which will get accepted here? Word AAAB will be accepted, but AAAB, AAA will not be accepted. This will be accepted, right? So that is how, this is that language WW. And the Turing machine can accept this language also. How does it do it? I will just explain to you the scheme. In the initial phase, what it will do is, it will check that the word is of even length, by alternating in two states, it will check that the word is of even length, and it will put a right hand marker at the first blank. So now the input string has been enclosed between left and right hand marker, and we know that the string is of even length, right? Then what it does is it moves to phase 2. In phase 2, what it will do is it will scan to the right till it hits the right hand marker, move one step to the left, and now our tape alphabet will consist of, our input alphabet was only symbols A and B. Our tape alphabet gamma will consist of three kinds of A, then a left A and a right A. So three kinds of A's are there can be written on the tape, and similarly three kinds of B's can be written on the tape. And what this in phase 2 Turing machine will do is it will scan from left to right, hit the right hand marker, move one step to the left, and replace the first symbol, whether it's A or B, by its right version. So we will have a right A in place of A here, right? And then it will move all the way to the left. It will move one step to the right, and it will replace the first normal symbol which also happens to be A, by left version of this. So in these two steps, by doing these two phases, what the Turing machine has achieved is that it has marked the first symbol as left A and converted the last symbol as right A. Okay. In the next two passes, what it will do is it will convert the second left symbol. It will skip over all the left symbols. It will find an normal symbol B and write it as right B. So this B gets converted to right B. It has skipped over everything which was not normal, and then it will come back and it will skip over the left hand marker, the left A, and the first A, which is not left or right, it will turn into left A. So what I have used is done in two passes. It has converted last two symbols into the right versions of them, and the first two symbols into the left version of them. You keep doing this till, in many steps, till at end, what will you do? All the first half of the string will be marked with left symbols, and the second half will be marked with right symbols. So you separated in the word WW, which may not be of form WW, you separated the first half from the second half by marking the symbols in the first half as the left version and the second half as the right version. This is how you do phase 2. So now you know which part is the left part and which part is the right part. Now in phase 3, what you will do is, we'll start at the beginning. The word looks like this initially, where the first half consists of left symbols and the second half consists of the right symbol. You will look at what is the first symbol. It's an A. You will remember that in your finite state memory. You will just remember the current symbol is A. You will skip over all the left symbols till you find the first right symbol. You will then check that the first right symbol is also an A. So you match the first left A with first right A, and you erase both of them. If this happens to be first left A and the first right symbol happens to be B, then the two words are not equal and you will go to the reject state. But if they are the same symbol, the first left symbol and the first right symbol are the same, you will be erasing both of them, and then you will come back. You will skip over blanks, you will find the first left symbol, remember that it's an A, go right, skipping over all the left symbols and blanks till you find the first right symbol, which is also an A, so you will erase that also, and then you will continue like this. So you will match, symbols, the first left symbol with the first right symbol, converting both of them to blank. This is how the Turing machine matches, and if it manages to convert all the symbols into blanks, then it accepts. So Turing machine can also recognize word of the form WW. These are also not, this WW is not also a context-free language, and remember that for any word that you give to this Turing machine, it will terminate either accepting or rejecting. So this is also a total Turing machine. So we've done two examples of a Turing machine. Now with that much, I'm going to introduce some terminology. Given a Turing machine M, we define language of Turing machine as all those words such that if you start the Turing machine in the configuration, blank, blank, blank forever, in this initial configuration, putting X onto the input tape, and if the Turing machine, starting with this configuration, halts, so it starts in the start configuration, it reaches the accepting configuration, then you said that the word is accepted and you include it in the language. So the language of the Turing machine consists of all the words, starting with which the Turing machine halts and accepts. What about words which are not in the language? So what about any word which is not in the language of the Turing machine? On those words, the Turing machine can either reject or it can loop forever. So there are two ways in which the Turing machine does not include a word in the language. It is either by rejecting the word or by having an infinite computation on that word, by looping on that word, right? So it's very important. There is an asymmetry between accepting and including a word and not including a word. A word is included if the Turing machine halts, infinite number of moves and accepts. On the other hand, a word is not included in the language of the Turing machine if either it is rejected in finite many steps by reaching the R state, or the Turing machine loops forever on that input X. Okay, so this is important. Now, oops, how did we just jumped a lot of steps? So what I want to do is I want to define some terminology. This terminology is very important, although it is simple. So a language, suppose you are given a language, some arbitrary subset of sigma star. This language is called recursively enumerable, in short written as R dot E dot. So a language A is called recursively enumerable if there exists a Turing machine M such that language of the Turing machine is same as A. That is, that Turing machine accepts exactly the words of A. M is such a Turing machine that it halts and accepts on all the strings which are in A, and for strings which are not in A, the Turing machine will either reject or loop. So if that is the case, then we say that the language is recursively enumerable. Okay. Slightly different terminology from this is that a language A is called recursive if there exists a total Turing machine M such that the language of the machine is A. That is, for every string in A, if you start the Turing machine, infinitely many steps, it will accept the word, and if you give it a word which is not in A, infinitely many steps, the Turing machine will reject that word. It will never loop because it's a total Turing machine. So this is a nice kind of, this is like an algorithm. You give it a problem to determine whether a word is in A or not. You start that Turing machine with input X, and it will accept if the word is in the language, and it will reject if the word is not in the language. So, then it is said to be, a Turing machine for the language A. That is, a Turing machine recognizing language A, right? And that language is called recursive if there is a total Turing machine recognizing it. If there is a Turing machine which may or may not be recursive, which may or may not be total, which recognizes the language, then it is called recursively enumerable. So it's obvious that recursive is a subset of every recursive language is a recursively enumerable, because every total Turing machine is also a Turing machine. So we have the class of recursive languages is a subset of class of recursively enumerable languages. Is it a strict subset? We don't know. Is there a gap between these two? That is something that we will address in next lecture. But today this terminology is important. So we saw examples of Turing machines which recognize A raised to n, B raised to n, C raised to n. In fact, you give it any arbitrary string, if it is not of this form, the Turing machine will reject, definitely. It will not go into a loop. And if it is of this form, it will accept. So we have a total Turing. In fact, the example we saw was a total Turing machine recognizing all strings of this form. So this is a recursive language. Similarly, WW machine that we saw was also a total Turing machine. So WW is also a recursive language. And in Cozen, you will find example of a Turing machine which recognizes all strings consisting of number of A's, which is power of 2. So A is repeated some power of 2 times, right? And then you can define a total Turing machine, which will recognize this language. And all these three languages are not context free, but they are recursive. They can be recognized by total Turing machines. Okay. A slightly different terminology is used sometimes, and I want to introduce that and end today's lecture. Oh dear, we have jumped a lot, so I need to go back now a lot. Sorry for that. Yes. Okay. So suppose we are given a property of words in over alphabet sigma. That is, you are given an arbitrary string in sigma star, and we want to ask whether property P holds for it. So property of strings is a function which takes a string and answers true or false. That is, whether the property holds for that X or not. So is the notion of a property clear to you? I can give an example. For example, the property, PH says that the length of X is a power of 2. So, words like this, AB, AA, AB will be in the language, because length of this is 2, which is a power of 2. Length of this is 4, which is also a power of 2, some power of 2. But Words like AAA will not be in this, will not satisfy this property. So P of X says X has length which is a power of 2. This is my property, and is the notion, that is the notion of property. Now we said that a property is decidable if there exists a total Turing machine M such that, you know, the language of M is same as this set. This set is called the characteristic set of this property. That is, we collect all strings X for which the property is true and exclude all strings for which the property is false. For every string the property is either true or false, so we collect all strings for which the property is true, we get a language. And if we can find a total Turing machine which accepts exactly this language, then we say that this property is decidable. Saying that this property is decidable is same as saying that the characteristic language of that property is recursive. So recursive and decidable are the same. A property is decidable if its characteristic language, which is given as this set, is recursive. That is the definition of decidable, right? Similarly, a property which is not decidable is called undecidable. Okay. We don't even know if there are any undecidable properties. Are there properties which cannot be determined by a Turing machine? Because this Turing machine is solving the question whether the property holds or not hold for that language X, for that string X, right? So a property which is not decidable is called undecidable. And unfortunately, there are properties which are undecidable. We will see them, although it's quite hard to come with them. A property is called semi-decidable if there exists a Turing machine which recognizes the characteristic language of the property. So you don't need that Turing machine to be total, but if it can recognize the characteristic language of the property, you know, then the property is said to be semi-decidable. So see, this Turing machine does what? Given a string X, we want to determine whether the property holds or not. We do this by running the Turing machine. And if the property is true, then this Turing machine is such that it will halt and accept. So to tell you, yes, my property is true. On the other hand, if the property is not true, the Turing machine may enter the reject state saying that the property is not true, or it may loop forever. It may never answer. So, you know, this is a Turing machine which for all the words which satisfy the property will answer in yes, but for words for which the property does not hold, it may answer no, or it may just keep searching for the answer and not finish. So these kind of properties are said to be semi-decidable. Okay, and that is the terminology that I wanted to do today. So today what have we done? We have done a formal definition of a Turing machine. We have seen its configuration, how Turing machine makes one move, transforming one configuration to another. The aim of the Turing machine is to go through a sequence of configurations till it reaches an accepting configuration or a rejecting configuration. So where is my example where I had drawn that? Here was such a sequence of transitions, you know, of the sequence of moves of the Turing machine resulting in an accepting configuration is said to be an accepting run of the Turing machine. And here is a 4-step run. Okay, 1 step, 2 steps to move this pointer to here, and 1 more step to recognize this B and B. So you know, this is Turing machine carries out computations like this, and Turing machines are defined like this. So please study this this very basic model of computation called Turing machine. And you may think it is very cumbersome and very simple, but see, it's obviously something that is, you know, that embodies a notion of mechanical calculation. And what we will show in next and next to next class is that this is not such a poor notion of computer. In fact, it's a rather powerful notion of computation. These Turing machines are very powerful. So we will that is the topic of the next class, to show that this very simple basic Turing machine that we have defined, you know, turns out to have a lot of power. And how much power do they have is something that we will see. We already saw that Turing machines could recognize some languages which were not context free. It's an exercise to you to imagine how every push-down automaton can be simulated by a Turing machine. That is, you can mimic the working of a push-down automaton by a Turing machine. How do we do that? At least a deterministic push-down automaton. We will mimic the, okay, we will see the exact working in next class, but certainly Turing machines are more powerful than push-down automata. That is something that we will establish. So, this basic model, that we have seen, although simple, revolutionized our understanding of what mechanical computation is. And what Turing said was that this machine that I define embodies the notion of the ultimate notion of computation. And no matter how powerful a computer you will ever design, my machine will be able to mimic it, taking maybe a lot more steps, consuming a lot more electricity, taking a lot more time, but I will be able to do job that any computer does. And there is no proof of this result, but there are many demonstrations of this. All known models of computation, including quantum computers, including chemical computers, biological computers, can all be simulated using Turing machine. And the fact that any computer can be simulated using Turing machine is called the Church-Turing thesis. So this is just to motivate to you that a very simple definition of a machine was given, and yet it was claimed that this is an all-powerful mechanical calculator. Okay, thank you. Let's end this talk.